Answer on this, so you don't have to answer this question. But Joanna, do you think as mayor you're going to have to go back to the table on pension reform?
Yeah, well, I think we're absolutely going to have to go back to the table. It's clear, and even the collaborative group that's been working, that the part that Mayor Lee was part of has even said we're going to have to go back to the table at some point because this doesn't address.
But the labor unions don't think that they're going to have to go back to the table. So how do you convince the labor unions that they're going to have to go back to the table and get them to the table and get them to give up something even more?
Well, first of all, so I keep saying this, like, where was the leadership 5 years ago when we knew we were heading in this direction? Because the expected return on the invested portfolio was 7.75%, and even if you look at the annual report from last year, the average return over the last 10 years has been 2.8%.
I was going to say, do you think you thought the 7.7 number too high?
Unbelievably high. To invest in safe securities. I've always said, if somebody knows where you can achieve that, tell me, so everyone else can put their money there. What'd you say? Yeah. So I mean, when you think about the time period when this all was put in place, and we were coming off that whole kind of crazy, irrational exuberance of the .com era, and I mean that was just those were not prudent numbers. If you really look at long-term, just returns on safely invested portfolios. So that's problem number one. And that problem, unfortunately, especially as we see what's even happening this week, I don't see us getting out of the, just kind of the market issues that we have overall, just the general, in terms of investments. So I don't think we're going to generate a strong return on this portfolio for quite some time. And therefore, if you go to more reasonable numbers, it's going to have to be readdressed, and we're going to have to sit down at the table and work it out together.
Leland, you have on the backing of a lot of the unions, and you've seen Jim Stearns is running your campaign, and he's a labor guy. How are you going to keep your relationships with the labor union strong and bring them back to the table to once again give more money back?
Well, let me just say that the pension issue is almost like the budget, where as soon as you close the budget, because of assumptions that are not met and new elements that comes into the picture, that you need to then start adjusting. And the same thing goes with this pension. I think it is the best that one can do, given the dynamics of who's involved in the discussion, some of the personalities that are involved. But I think the reality that everybody understands and clearly knows is that, given some of the assumptions that are underlying the pension, that you've got to come back. I think the strength of my campaign and strength of my mayorship is the fact that I do have relatively good relationships with labor. I think, like everybody else in the city, there's a lot of distrust. People don't trust this, they don't trust that. And part of the mistrust is that they're afraid that if you make accommodations now, whether or not do you open up the floodgate to other kinds of concessions down the road. And so what, in order to kind of fix this particular problem, you need to have someone in the table, in the room, having enough relationships so that you know that if you give up something, it is not because you're going to then be sort of the unending pipeline for more concessions down the road. So I think that when I become mayor, I am going to go and bring in labor and bring in other parties to these kinds of negotiations and help them understand. Does labor want to kill San Francisco? Absolutely not. Do they want to kill the pension system? Absolutely not. It is not in their interest to do that. What is in their interest is that they feel that over the years, concessions that they have made gave them this particular pension set of benefits. And so if we are going to take more and more away, they want to ensure that what they're going to get is in fact a system that is going to work, and that this is not going to be an unending request for them to concede even more and more. And I think that's the challenge for all of us, to figure out, how do we find that balance of getting enough of the union so that we can continue to make this system workable.